Nurses, have you ever lied to save a patient from getting in trouble? I was an ER nurse on a military base. There was an accident during training. Accidents happen all day every day, but this one was a flight incident. Flight incidents are a big deal. People die and multi-million-dollar aircrafts are destroyed. This accident was no different. My patient was the pilot, who ejected and survived. Unfortunately, everyone else on the flight did not. The accident was considered my patient's fault. So they brought the guy in. He walked in and was fine, but was wrecked with survivor's guilt. I was the highest-ranking nurse in the ER that day. And for that reason, the flight incident documentation was assigned to me. I was to perform the mandated blood draw to test the pilot for substances or alcohol. The room was somber. Deaths of people who were close to each other like brothers are easily the hardest thing to get through. The pilot's entire squadron, all his bosses' bosses, were there. I drew his blood. And it's a chain of custody, which means every person who touches the vials has to sign who they handed them off to for legal purposes. It's all to verify that no one tampered or switched out a vial. I don't know why, but I drew excess blood. Probably because it was my habit to draw a vial or two extra, in case a doctor wanted to add tests so I wouldn't have to stick a patient with a needle twice. When I gathered my trash up, I put them in my pocket. I don't know why I did this. I usually would have just thrown them away, but I had them with me when the pilot was discharged. His squadron went and got drunk together as they attempted to pull the pilot from an abyss of self-blame. I suppose it is important when that's your job to get past it so you can fly again, and I'm not going to judge anyone for how they managed to do that. It's got to be difficult, going back to work, with the same people, all of you knowing you were piloting during an accident that killed other people. So, they get a pass to go get blackout drunk. But not an hour after they left, the lab called me. There was a problem. The chain of custody blood draws needed to be drawn again. Someone had dropped the first ones on the floor and smashed it into a million pieces. Now he was at a bar, getting drunk, and I had to call him and have him come in to get a new blood test. It would not be clean. He would have alcohol in his blood, but I still had to have him come in. Everyone understood the ramifications of what was happening. With alcohol in his blood sample that was taken for his flight incident, he would be court-martialed. There would be a trial, he would get charges, and he would do a lot of time in the slammer. His commanding officer came with him and his expression was grave. The pilot's fate was sealed. Unless he told the truth, that this was a redraw. And that it happened well after the pilot was off duty. But that meant the flight incident report had no blood draw. Which would end this pilot's career. Walking the pilot into the room where I was drawing his blood was like walking a career to the gallows. The whole time I did the paperwork and drew the blood, I knew what I had to do. The commanding officer stammered and tried to find a way out of the situation. I don't know what he thought I could do. No one pressured me, no one threatened me, and no one coerced me to do what I did. I did it all on my own and no one knew what I was even planning. I took the blood I had just drawn into my right hand. The pilot was looking down at the ground, his head hung in grief, for the dead and for himself. "Look at me," I said. "Look at me." I waited for his eyes to meet mine. He had to understand what was happening and that everything would be okay. "Do you remember who drew your blood earlier today? Who did it?" "Who?" I demanded of him. "You did. It was you." He replied. Holding his blood in my right hand, I reached into my pocket with my left. I took out the blood I had held onto. And I told him, "This is some of the blood I drew from you earlier. This is yours." There was extra. His face went blank. It was the moment just before understanding. I looked at him, at his commander, and then turned and put the blood I just drew from him into the garbage. And I put the vials I drew on him earlier down in front of me and filled out my document. I was falsifying a document. But it was his blood, I drew it and it never left my custody. There was no way he was going to have clean blood for this draw. I knew it, his commander knew it, he knew it. Relief washed over the room. Then the pilot mumbled something to his commander. I knew I was committing a crime, but the pilot was not under the influence in any way during that accident. Upon his return, he was not drunk but there would be alcohol in his blood. If that blood ran, his career would be over. And it would be over unjustly, because he was sober when I got the first sample. I don't remember the look on his face afterwards, or what either of them said to me in gratitude. I only heard my heart beat and the blood rushing in my ears, because I knew it would be me doing time if anyone knew what I had done. I blew them off, waved them away and out of the room. They couldn't walk out triumphantly, they couldn't show that their spirits had lifted, couldn't slap me on the back. They had to leave without a fuss, so no one had any idea what I had just done. I feel terrible about it. But I'd do it again. It was the right thing to do. Even if it messes with me to this day. It's good to get it off of my chest.